All right, let's move on to our Live Well conversation. Schizophrenia is the topic today, very much misunderstood, but it is a real mental health condition out there, often portrayed in extreme or inaccurate ways. It's a diagnosis that also carries a lot of stigma and not nearly enough understanding. But behind the label are real people, each with their own story. They have their own challenges and strengths. It's usually something that we don't understand because the symptoms are characterized by hallucinations, by disorganized thinking, and at times delusions. We're going to be shedding the light on what schizophrenia actually looks like, unpack the symptoms, and explore how understanding and empathy can make a little bit of a difference. Dr. Lerato Dikobe-Kalane is joining us, psychiatrist with a special interest in bipolar disorder, ADHD, depression. Thank you so much, Dr. Lerato. Welcome on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Hey, I want to start this by acting insensitive here because this is the response that we usually get from people when they see someone with schizophrenia. Hey, is this person crazy? That's the big question that we ask. I know crazy is not a good word to use in psychology, but it's a mainstream word that people usually associate with schizophrenia. Are schizophrenic people crazy?
People with schizophrenia are not crazy, but all of us have a bit of cray-cray in us.
Of course.
So especially us on the African continent with our diverse languages, there are a lot of terminologies or words that are used to describe somebody who may be having a psychotic episode. In Sesotho, bata wahlanya, in Zulu, uyahlanya uphambene, or madness. Those are the words that are commonly used to describe somebody whose behavior is a bit disorganized or a bit out of the norm. But schizophrenia, by definition, is a psychiatric illness. It's a chronic psychotic illness, which is characterized by disordered thought and disordered behavior. So if your thinking process is disordered, it's going to influence how you behave.
So did you use the phrase psychotic disorder?
Yes, it's a chronic psychotic disorder.
What does that mean, doctor?
Right. When we say somebody is having a psychotic episode, it means the person's reality testing is off. So the person is not in full touch with reality. That's what psychosis means. And psychosis manifests in the thought, how you process your thoughts, how you organize your thinking process. Another very important component of that thought is the content of the thought. And that's where delusions come in. So the thought content, if it's disordered, it means that you are having delusions. So you are believing things that are not plausible, right? And then another wing or another prong of psychosis is the disturbance in perception. Perception is how you perceive the world, how you perceive anything that is outside of you. And we perceive the world with our five senses. So we perceive the world through our eyes, ears, skin, taste, and our nose, what we smell. So when somebody with schizophrenia is having a perceptual disturbance, often that perceptual disturbance would be auditory. So they will experience auditory hallucinations. So they will hear people that other people cannot hear. So that is a perceptual disturbance. When your thought is disturbed, when your perception is disturbed, automatically your behavior is going to be disturbed. And that's when people will present with disorganized behavior sometimes. Some people will present with catatonia, where they're just not moving or talking.
Wow. Okay. Because someone then would ask, doctor, why isn't that crazy?
Because crazy can describe many things in our social context. crazy. I mean, I've got adolescent children, and they'll go and have fun. I'll be like, Mom, it was crazy. Like, it was fun,
Yes.
you know? Or you as a mom will buy them something cool and they're like, Mom, that's crazy, man. You're crazy, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
So the word crazy is used to describe so many things.
I'm busy going in this train of asking questions because when we do see the manifestations of schizophrenia, even the well-educated seem to go back to these derogatory terms. Why do you think that's the case, Doctor?
It's driven by stigma.
Mm-hmm.
It's driven by stigma, and stigma is driven by fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear of that which we don't understand. It's easier for us to just stigmatize it. And when you stigmatize it, it means you avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
So ignorance fuels stigma. And stigma leads to segregation of people. It leads to people being ill-treated.
Mm-hmm. You know, I love that you say that because it also gives us an opportunity, Doctor, when we do use a derogatory term for someone, then we disassociate with ourselves from that person and almost create like, I don't have to be involved because they've got schizophrenia, so they are crazy. Therefore, it has nothing to do with me. But that's where we lack the empathy.
Yeah, it's a them thing, not me.
Absolutely.
Until it hits home. Until it hits home.
Mm-hmm. So how do you notice that someone is struggling from schizophrenia and it's not another misunderstood health condition? And where have you seen, Dr. Lerato, people mistaking a schizophrenia with something that it shouldn't be?
Okay. As a non-medical person, especially as a non-mental health care provider person, I would not encourage a person to be diagnosing people with schizophrenia.
I love that.
Only someone who is qualified to diagnose schizophrenia shall do so. And people that are qualified to diagnose schizophrenia would be a medically trained doctor who has a medical degree, an MBCHB. That person would be qualified to diagnose schizophrenia. And then taken above that is somebody who then has specialized in psychiatry, like myself, will then be able to not only diagnose schizophrenia, but also manage schizophrenia. And then the non-medically trained people would then be the psychologists. And in the psychologists also, it's only two categories of psychologists actually who are qualified to diagnose schizophrenia. And those would be the clinical psychologists and the counseling psychologists. Not industrial psychologists, not educational psychologists, not research psychologists. Only clinical psychologists and counseling psychologists are trained and qualified to diagnose schizophrenia.
Thank you for that, Doctor.
Yes.
Because what we do most of the time is that we diagnose even the people who have maybe offbeat personalities in the workplace. Like, this one has got schizophrenia. But I love that fact that you say, we use those. Yeah, this one is schiz. He's a schizo, And these are terms that we use so lightly, but they actually are very harmful to those who suffer from this particular serious condition. Dr. Lerato, stay there on the line. I want you to continue your train of thought. I know you wanted to say something to us before I interrupted there, but let's take a break. We'll come back to you.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
The story that takes us to Zambia. There are two men actually that were sentenced to prison for the plot to killed the president with witchcraft.
You go like what?
So these guys were arrested actually in Lusaka, and what was found on them was a live chameleon. Can you believe that?
Animal tails and bottles of concoction.
That law takes us back to 1914, which is the Witchcraft Act. I can imagine now arrested and they go to jail for the next 2 years. You know, I presume that when you get to jail, they get to ask you actually, what is it that you committed? Now, this is the first of its kind, by the way, for somebody to be arrested for such. They remember whenever they pass.
Hey, Chikanga, hey, Uloya, hey, Mulosi.
And imagine here I am in these early hours of the mornings, I get to talk about
Witchcraft.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. Benjamin Moshatama and Palisatawo on the move.
Hey, thank you for joining us on all our platforms, DSTV Channel 802, OpenView 628, and remember we are on our new website on www.channelafrica.co.za. And thank you to those who are joining us on that live stream. I have to thank you because we don't take our listeners or our viewers for granted. Thank you, Katide Twala, for your thoughts there. So I'm listening to your number one show in Africa, Palisa and Benjamin. Keep up the good work, guys. Well, thank you so much, Katide. Thank you for your compliment there, and we'll keep things moving as we're getting some practical thoughts coming from our guest on schizophrenia today. Dr. Lerato Dikobe-Kalane is joining us for our conversation as we're trying to understand how do we get to know what schizophrenia is in a way that doesn't reassert our stereotypes around it. Dr. Lerato, you were continuing your train of thoughts there when around the question of who should diagnose. You can continue. I apologize for the interruption.
No worries. So instead of labeling people as suffering from schizophrenia, you rather, acknowledge that this person's behavior has become odd, especially if it's a person that you've known before they became ill. You are able then to notice, to say, this person's behavior has changed, they're behaving strangely, perhaps they should get help. The other question that you had asked was, what are the common misconceptions or misdiagnoses of schizophrenia that we see? Sometimes people that are presenting with a depressive episode, a severe depressive episode, can have disordered thought processes and their behavior may then change. And then people who are untrained will then be very quick to say they have schizophrenia. Other people that have bipolar disorder and are now presenting with a manic episode where they are now on the high extreme of the bipolar disorder can be mistakenly diagnosed as having schizophrenia by, again, an untrained person. And very common here on the African continent would be people who are going through an ancestral calling where their behavior may change and their thought processes may also change. An untrained person can also be quick to say, oh, this person has schizophrenia.
Okay, let's move into that realm of how we respond to schizophrenia from a treatment perspective, because I want us to start there before I go to how do we respond as those around someone who's struggling with schizophrenia. When it comes to treating a person with schizophrenia, what's involved there? Because I think there's also a lot of mythology around that.
The first port of treatment is to make the correct diagnosis. We make diagnoses, unlike our other colleagues in the medical fraternity. We don't do blood tests. We don't need to do a brain scan. We don't need to use a stethoscope to be able to make a diagnosis. We make a diagnosis based on the history that we get, the information that we get from the patient themselves and from their family members or the support structure that accompanies them to the assessment. We also are able to make a diagnosis based on our observation of the patient in front of us. So we observe the behavior, we observe what they are saying, when we're listening to them, we hear how they are putting their thoughts together, and we listen to the content of what they are busy telling us. Once a diagnosis of schizophrenia has been made, we need to classify the type of schizophrenia that we are dealing with, because there are different types of schizophrenia. There's paranoid schizophrenia, and that one is mostly associated with the disordered thought content. Someone with paranoid schizophrenia, their thought process or their thought form would be as logical as my thought form is. Well, I hope my thought form is logical. But what would be the offset would be the content of the thoughts. So those are people that would then have the paranoid delusions, believing that there's a conspiracy against them, believing that there's a satellite that is hovering above their house and they're recording their thoughts and, or broadcasting their thoughts. But when you look at their behavior, you can then see, but the behavior has become odd. They are now locking themselves up. They are now making sure that their phone is switched off all the time in case they get recorded. So that's where you then find a thought content influencing negatively the behavior. So that would be paranoid schizophrenia. Catatonic schizophrenia would then be somebody who is mute, not talking, not responsive, not moving, not eating. So that is somebody who is catatonic. Then there's disorganized schizophrenia, where when you're having the conversation, it's word salads, disordered sentence construction, what do they call it? Loose associations, and completely disorganized behavior. There we make a diagnosis of disorganized schizophrenia. So it's the types of schizophrenia. And then before we then decide which medication we're going to give, we have to then grade the severity. If it is severe and a person has to then be admitted into hospital, if someone is disorganized and in complete, they've lost touch with reality completely, then they are unable to consent to their own treatment. And sometimes they can become aggressive, not because they are naturally aggressive people, but because they may be feeling threatened. And when you're feeling threatened, instinct is, I need to defend myself. So such a person would then have to be admitted into a facility as an involuntary patient. And then they would have to be administered medication involuntarily. And in a case like that, the best involuntary way of giving medication would be through an injection, muscular injection. Once they start getting better and they're able to now consent to treatment, we can then switch down to oral medication.
All right. I mean, we've run out of time, Dr. Lerato. Just in a minute or so, as we wrap up, how do we respond as family members of that patient, as colleagues at work?
We need to understand that this person is ill. The same way that if I've got a persistent cough that's not getting better, I've got night sweat, I'm losing weight, possibilities are that I've got tuberculosis. So somebody with a chronic psychotic disorder may be suffering from schizophrenia. We just need to make sure that we give advice for them to go and get the appropriate medical care. Once they are on treatment, we give them support. You don't need to constantly be reminding them, did you take your medication? Did you take your medication? Somebody with schizophrenia has a right to be upset, has a right to feel sad. And it doesn't mean that if that person is lashing out at you or calling you out on something, you go, I guess they didn't take their medication today. So we just need to give empathy and understanding. And the best thing is you need to educate yourself, because that's how we eliminate stigma, by eradicating ignorance. So we educate ourselves, know what we're dealing with, and then we would do away with stigma.
This is a fantastic conversation, Dr. Lerato. Thank you so much. Thank you for using also a language that we can understand in breaking some of these stigmas that we were talking about earlier. Thank you for joining us here on Channel Africa. Are there platforms online where we can find you?
I am available. Apparently, I'm an Instagrammer now. Thanks
Good.
to my children. So I am on Instagram, Dr. _Lerato. I am also on Facebook, and I am available. I've got a website. So if you just Google Dr. Lerato Dikobe-Kalane, it'll give you my, what do you call it?
It
My
will give you your
website.
website link.
And
Fantastic.
on the website, my contact details.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dr. Lerato. This is such a good conversation, and I'm glad that your kids got you online because you could be helping so many people with these kind of conversations. So well done to the little ones. All right.
Thank you.
Sure, that's Dr. Lerato Dikobe-Kalane, a psychiatrist, and she's been helping us on understanding schizophrenia. Did that help you? What questions do you have? Maybe we can do a follow-up on that one because these things can actually be ones that we need to talk about a little bit more so we can understand them better. Let us know what you think about that conversation, what questions that maybe conversation has for you or poses for you. Remember that WhatsApp number is +27 63